Today on Hebrew Book Review, Hebrew with Pleasure by Edna Kadman. Shalom lekulam. Today on Hebrew Book Review, I am going to talk about Hebrew with Pleasure Without a Teacher's Help by Edna Kadman. This book obviously is geared towards teaching Hebrew students who don't have the benefit of a teacher, right? So they're not in a classroom, they don't have someone guiding them through. So it's about 1 to 2% religious. It's really not a religiously oriented book. But after we've kind of gotten our footing, she starts illustrating some of the grammar points with the help of expressions in Hebrew. Expressions or sayings. And some of them are from Jewish religious texts, mostly the Bible and the Talmud. Just the fact that it has biblical origins doesn't necessarily make it a religious saying. So the font is a really typical modern font, and it looks like it's 12 point. It's a pretty normal size, like the size you would read in a newspaper. She teaches cursive at the very beginning, but then she never uses it again. And something that I love is that she uses Ktiv Maleh, and that is great. I love that because adults are eventually, if we get far enough in our Hebrew learning, we're going to have to learn how to read without nikud. And so being familiar with Ktiv Maleh is just one of those stepping stones towards reading without nikud. And so the book is intended for students who are starting completely from scratch. She teaches the letters and the sounds and the nikud and the handwriting, although in some senses she does a really good job of stepping the students up to learning everything they need to know about the alphabet. But then in another sense, there is not a lot of guidance with regards to recognizing the difference between certain letters or forming the letters properly when writing yourself. So it is geared for people who are at the very beginning of their Hebrew journey, but I definitely would recommend a separate supplemental book that would teach the reading and the writing and the recognition of letters a little bit more thoroughly. So basically, Hebrew with Pleasure, it starts from scratch and it goes all the way through. It gets almost every grammar point that a Hebrew learner needs to know. Each chapter gives one or a few grammar points. It has a short vocabulary list, and then it presents the grammar point and the vocabulary, and then it gives a few exercises, and the answers to the exercises are in the back of the book. The student will learn everything they need to know about nouns and adjectives and pronouns and verbs, except that it doesn't teach pu'al and huf'al. But like I said, I didn't learn that either until I got into level 7 at my ulpan. And it also teaches all of the prepositions and their declinations. The general order of the presentation of material throughout the book is it's very logical. It makes a lot of sense. And also within a chapter, the presentation of the different aspects of a grammatical point, and then the interspersing of the exercises and the fact that they step up slowly is also an asset. And it is a truly amazing feat that it can cover so much in just one single book, while including exercises and then little extras like the expressions and the readings and stuff like that. And so I really liked at the very beginning, she had a real step-by-step approach to teaching the pronunciation. And that's something that's particularly important for a student who has no teacher, because, you know, if you don't know how to pronounce the letters or pronounce the words in a language, you're especially when all you have is a book, you don't have recordings or stuff like that, that can be pretty difficult. So she did a good job of taking it super slowly at the beginning. And it's also just so important that the exercises kind of build on one another. They get slightly harder. And then the reading exercises, I like that they also kind of get longer and more complicated. So here's a reading exercise from, what page is this? This is page 108. And you can see it's basically a paragraph. But then here we are on page 235, and it's a lot longer. If you gave a student, even if it was all stuff that they knew, at the very beginning you gave them a big long text to read, they would probably freak out. So she kind of builds them up to be a little bit longer as she goes. And so there really is a lot to like about this book. So this book definitely has its shortcomings though. And a lot of these are going to make it difficult for a learner to learn Hebrew, especially if they're new to language learning. If Hebrew is the second language that they're trying to learn and they're not familiar with conjugations and all these different language terms that we use when we're learning a second language, they're liable to get pretty confused. I do love that she lumps all of the like sounding vowels together, but what I don't love is how she describes the sound. So I'm gonna give you an example, actually quite a few examples. So Hebrew really only has 5 vowel sounds: a, e, I, O, U. So on this chart, she has the A vowels, and she says as in farm and garden. And I'm always really, really skeptical of anybody using a vowel that's followed by an R in their pronunciation guide, because when a vowel is followed by an R, it sounds really different than when it's followed by any other consonant or when it's just sitting there on its own. And so when we're making a pronunciation guide, we should really never use words with R's in them. So farm and garden, and then hut. Well, hut, that sound, a short U, that is not the way we should be trying to pronounce our Israeli ah. So, exhibit A. And so then, exhibit B is the description of the e vowel. So she gives us there. Again, we know what I think of using R's. And then obey. So the A in obey, which does kind of come close. Then we have get. So an English speaker is thinking, well, get and obey do not really have the same vowel. And then girl. Girl, how is girl at all the eh sound? It doesn't sound anything like it. So this is problematic. And I feel like I could go on. Go on and on and on. I'm going to show you this transliteration. Look at those first 2 words. How are those first 2 words supposed to be pronounced? Holy moly, if I didn't know, I'd be looking at M-E-A-Y-I-N and say, how am I supposed to pronounce that? And then H-A-I-S-H, a lot of people are going to pronounce that Heish. And it's not. It's ha-ish. And this is why she should have put apostrophes in these words. Many transliterators will put an apostrophe anytime there's an ayin or an aleph, and she doesn't do this here, and so then you get a word that you see and you don't know how to pronounce it. The whole purpose of a pronunciation guide is to let us know how to pronounce it, and so if your pronunciation guide isn't clear, you know that's a problem for students. And again, I think I mentioned this before, she really doesn't give us any help as to how to distinguish the various letters. You know, Hebrew has a lot of letters that look very similar, or I'm thinking of like a vav and a nun sofit look exactly the same, except that one dips under the line and one doesn't. And so it's just like a long line and a longer line, right? So it's really important to explain to students how to distinguish these letters, what to be careful of when they're writing, all kinds of things like that. And she just doesn't do it. And this is true when she presents the print letters and the cursive letters. The cursive letters, she basically gives a chart, and the cursive letters are written once, and then there's a space for the student to write it basically once. And she doesn't give any explanation as to letters that extend above the top line or below the bottom line, and you know, or if they're small or if they're long, if they take up the whole space, you know, and that's in my opinion a recipe for disaster. So sometimes she presents the grammar using language that is a little bit too technical, and I've got two examples here. So here on page 22, she's saying, so she says, very important, these three letters always appear only at the beginning of the word with a dot inside, and the dot is the dagesh. She says, therefore, when you hear ch at the beginning of a word, it will always be the letter chet. That's a great thing to learn as a student, because sometimes you can't remember how to spell. You maybe don't know how to spell. You've never seen the word before. So that's a really great tip. And then she says, when you hear the sound of V at the beginning of a word, it will always be the letter Vav. The conjunction letter in Hebrew is Vav. But she never actually explained what the conjunction letter is. And I've got so many issues with this. First of all, I am willing to bet that there is a large percentage of the English-speaking population that does not know what a conjunction is, or that and is one of them. Secondly, she says the conjunction letter in Hebrew is Vav. In English, none of our conjunctions are just a letter, so that's a really confusing statement to us. Lastly, there's more than one conjunction, even if you're just talking about coordinating conjunctions. So we've got 7 of them. And so this was just a very, very confusing thing to say. Another example is the infinitive. And she says, I think this is the first place where she says it. Very important. The infinitive is invariable. She never told us what an infinitive was, and she didn't really explain what she meant by invariable. And so that, you know, knowing infinitives is actually a big part of knowing verbs in a language. You know, she talks about them a lot before actually explaining what an infinitive is. So it's things like that I think could be really confusing to a language learner. there are some typesetting issues in here that can, again, cause a lot of confusion. And I'm looking here at page 87, and here she's explaining how to express possession, but she's also at this point explaining how to decline the preposition le, meaning to. So in English, if we want to say to me, to you, to him, to David, they're all going to be, we're going to have a word to, and then we're going to have the object pronouns. Me, you, him, her, it, David, Susan, mom, whatever. They're all going to be two separate words. To, and then an object form of some words. When the object of the preposition is a pronoun, they're always attached together, and there's just, we call it a pronominal ending that goes on the pronoun. So we've got this little chart, and it's showing first singular, second singular, third singular. So that's first, second, third person. And then first plural, second plural, third plural. But at the top, she says M and F. That's obviously masculine and feminine, except that the M is on the left and the F is on the right. And when you look at the actual chart, the masculine is on the right and the feminine is on the left. It's kind of even hard to tell what's going on with this chart, right? So there's just a lot of things like that that are potentially really confusing to students. So this one's so hard. Do I recommend it? Do I not recommend it? I definitely don't recommend this book if Hebrew is the first, second language that you're learning. Right? If you only know English and you don't know any other languages and you're like, I want to learn Hebrew, I don't think this is your book, because I think there's too many terms in there that will be very confusing to a novice language learner. And I think it's going to send the learner constantly to somewhere else, to Google, to a dictionary, trying to figure out what she's even talking about here. If you are a veteran foreign language learner, you already speak some other language, maybe a couple of other languages, and so now you already know all the lingo, you know about, you know what a conjunction is, you know what an infinitive is, you know what conjugations are, then this book might help you out. And especially because it's only one book teaching you pretty much everything you need to know, it might be a good investment. But I would still, even if you are a veteran language learner, unless that other language is Yiddish, you are going to need another book to teach you the alphabet, because the way she teaches the alphabet is just not sufficient, no matter how good you are at learning languages. So as always, if you have any questions or feedback, please leave it in the comments and I will do my best to get back to you. And also, if you have a book that you'd like me to review, leave that one also in the comments and I will do my best to get a copy of it and do a video. Hit like if you enjoyed this video and subscribe and press the notification bell if you want to see more. Lehitraot bapa'am hapa'ah. See you next time.